Welcome back to the channel, everyone, where we love talking about movies and more. Today I have a movie review for you for Marvel Studios' The Avengers. Before we get any further in this review, I want to ask you guys to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified when new videos go live on this channel. When you guys do that, it always helps me out and I greatly appreciate it. Now, let's talk about the plot. When Thor's evil brother Loki gains access to the unlimited power of the energy cube called the Tesseract, Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D., initiates a superhero recruitment effort to defeat the unprecedented threat to Earth. Joining Fury's dream team are Iron Man, Captain America, the Hulk, Thor, the Black Widow, and Hawkeye. All right, The Avengers. What was good about this movie? This was my second movie theater experience with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and my first experience was Captain America, the First Avenger. That kind of got me introduced to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I hadn't seen any of the movies prior to this, so I hadn't seen the Iron Man films in theaters. I hadn't seen the Incredible Hulk in theaters. I hadn't seen Thor. So by the time I got to see The Avengers, I was only familiar with Captain America. I didn't even actually know this movie was coming out because I wasn't familiar with the post-credit nature of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So when it came time to see Captain America, the First Avenger, I walked out of the theater once the credits started rolling. I wasn't used to staying past the credits for anything additional at the theater. And then I watched the First Avenger at home, and for whatever reason, had the credits playing. I was off doing something else, was distracted. Thankfully, my attention turned back to the television, saw that it said Captain America will return in The Avengers, and then I watched that trailer for The Avengers, and I realized, oh, this guy's got another movie coming out next year. He's going to be featured in another film called The Avengers that I had no idea was coming out. At this time, I wasn't really following movie news or tracking with the MCU, so I was introduced to the MCU in phase 1, but it was the tail end of phase 1. I wasn't on this journey from the very beginning, but pretty close. Once I found out that he was going to be in another movie, I was so excited because I was a big fan of Captain America, the First Avenger. That is still one of my favorite films. I think it's one of the most underrated comic book films that has been made, and I quite like that film. Chris Evans' Captain America has always been my favorite character from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and so when I found out that he was coming back in The Avengers, I had to get myself to the theater to go see this movie. I was in my early years in high school, so I was still pretty young, a young teenager at the time, just getting exposed to the comic book genre in a bigger and better way. You know, I'd only seen a couple of comic book based films. It was around the year 2012 that my love for comic book based media really grew with films like The Dark Knight Rises and of course films like The Avengers. I was blown away with my experience at the theater watching this. I'd never seen something like this before. Of course, I didn't have the information that I needed for all of these other characters. I didn't really know who Iron Man was. I knew the Hulk from the Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby, Incredible Hulk TV show. I had no idea who Thor was, and so I was only here for Captain America, and this just opened my eyes to the broader Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I loved the experience I had here. All of these individual pieces coming together into one big event, and this film should not have worked. Around the time of the 90s, Marvel was not in a great place financially. They ended up selling a lot of their properties off to film studios to make money off of these characters because the comic book sales hadn't been doing so well, and so they sold off the rights to these characters for film studios to make movies based off of these characters in hopes that it would boost the comic book sales so that people would get excited to go see these characters in theaters, first read about these characters, and then go see the movies based on these characters. And that worked to an extent. It did help Marvel to grow and to get out of their financial detriment. And it came time, I think about the mid-2000s, about 2004, 2005 or so, Marvel Studios was born with the intention of using all the characters that Marvel Comics still owned the rights to make films from the other film studios didn't have access to anymore or at all. And so they had the lineup for The Avengers. They would be getting the characters back in time to make a movie based on these characters that consisted of Iron Man, the Hulk, Captain America, Thor, characters like Black Widow, Hawkeye. And so they had the official lineup for The Avengers. And at the time, Marvel Studios was being ran by Avi Arad, who's responsible for a lot of the stuff with the Spider-Man films. He's still over there at Sony, if I remember correctly. And he brought alongside him a young producer named Kevin Feige, who had been involved with Marvel films going back to the original X-Men film. It was the collaboration of these guys and a couple other people at Marvel that brought together Marvel Studios and had the idea of doing a shared connected universe like there was already in the comics to create something like this on the big screen. That started with Iron Man, then it went into the Incredible Hulk, and then shortly after that, those two films came out. Disney came along, bought Marvel Studios, gave them them an even bigger budget and more room to grow. Then they went on to do Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America, and then they were already full steam ahead in the year 2010 with the idea to do the Avengers. I think at the offset, they wanted to get to that point eventually, but they had to prove themselves specifically with the first Iron Man movie. They did that in spades. They did an amazing job with that film, and I think they did an amazing job with The Incredible Hulk as well. That film is still super underrated, and I actually did a review for The Incredible Hulk. You can check that video out on my channel now, and that film I thought did pretty well. And then they went on to do Iron Man 2 in the year 2010, and then 2011 comes along. They did Thor and Captain America. They proved themselves by setting up and building up this universe with all these other characters. They were now becoming a proven franchise, but could this work cohesively with bringing all of these individual pieces together? Could they do this? It had never been done before. They finally did it. They released the Avengers out in theaters in the year 2012. This film shocked everybody that watched it. It blew audiences away, critics away, did amazing at the box office. It did very, very well, impressed a lot of people, and it really pushed the MCU into where it could go leading up to Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. The Avengers movie was the true proof of concept for what they could do going forward to truly launch the story throughout the rest of the Infinity Saga. The Infinity Saga had kind of been hinted at throughout the other Phase 1 films, but Phase 1 was really just proof of concept. Can this universe work? It did, and all culminated with the Avengers. Now, I love this film. It kind of feels at times like a sequel to Iron Man 2. It feels at times like a sequel to Captain America, the First Avenger. It feels like a nice follow-up to The Incredible Hulk. It feels like a sequel to Thor, specifically with Thor and Loki and some other players from the Thor film. It was really good at bringing all of these individual pieces together, feeling like a true follow-up to all of the movies you had been watching. And even if you had only been watching one of the franchises or a couple of the franchises, you were rewarded as an audience member for following these characters and then going to see this movie, and a lot of that being paid off for you at the theater. And it really paid off for you if you had been following all of these movies from the get-go, from the beginning. And it was after the Avengers, after I went and saw that movie, I was on a high with Marvel Comics. I could not wait to watch more from the MCU. Knew there was other movies I had missed. I immediately went to go watch The Incredible Hulk. I immediately went to go watch Iron Man 2, and Thor. Got caught up on this, and I was so excited. From that point since, I have not missed a single movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in theaters. Can't say that specifically for the Disney Plus shows. I have missed a few of those, and I'm still catching up on some of that stuff. But the movies specifically, I have not missed a single film from the MCU since Captain America, the First Avenger, and the Avengers. Watched both of those films in theaters, and then I watched all the Phase 2 films in theaters, all the Phase 3 films in theaters, all the Phase 4 films in theaters, all the Phase 5 films. So excited to see where this goes. Now, we're kind of in a bumpy road now with the MCU. It's not quite as good, I think, as it used to be, but I also think it might be getting back to where it was. I do have some excitement for the MCU going forward, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we have in the next couple of Avengers movies. But it was this movie that allowed the other great films that we have in the MCU to happen, the other great Phase 2, Phase 3 films, and some of the Phase 4 films to happen because of what the Phase 1 films did and a lot of what the Avengers movie did. Now, say what you will about Joss Whedon, but he did create a great film in the Avengers, and I think he created a great film in Avengers Age of Ultron, and we'll get to that film eventually on the channel as well. I thought he did a pretty good job with bringing all of these different elements together. He even had a different idea for what he wanted the Avengers to be. There was a different lineup at one point. He was able to maneuver that, change that, and work in the studio system and still make the film work at the end of the day. He wanted Wasp in instead of Black Widow. He wanted a few other things changed. I think at one point they were thinking about using Ultron as the main villain, and then at one point it was going to be the Skrulls, and then they went with the Chitauri. And so he was able to maneuver and change with what Marvel Studios was wanting out of him. He was a team player. He did a really good job with working within the studio system and still delivering something that felt like a very great movie. I also love the small scale that it uses. Now, I know that this is a big alien invasion plot that's bringing all of these different heroes together, but if you compare this film to a lot of other films in the MCU, specifically as you go further on into the Avengers films and a lot of the multiverse saga, this film is so scaled down compared to those. It's a very simple plot. It's easy to follow, and I love the small scale nature of this movie. 6 individual heroes coming together to save the world. Not like 60 or 70 or 80 that we're going to be getting in the next couple of Avengers movies, or all the characters that we got at the end of Avengers Endgame and all the characters we got in Avengers Infinity War. This movie is scaled down. It's a lot simpler, a lot more simplistic, and it works really well because of that. It benefits because of that. And it's more focused, I think, because of that. It's able to focus on the individual characters, and the movie doesn't feel so stretched because it's able to give time to Iron Man, to Thor, to Captain America, to the Hulk, to Black Widow, to Hawkeye, to Nick Fury, to to Agent Coulson, to all of these characters, to Loki, and it does an amazing job with all of these different elements. And all these characters work so well off of each other. Of course, Robert Downey Jr., of course, he's still bringing his A game. He was proven in this role in the first 2 Iron Man movies, and he knows exactly what to do with this character. And the other actors, of course, Chris Hemsworth, you only saw one thing out of him in Thor. He just continues that greatly here, and it's the version of Thor I think that I prefer, closer to the more serious nature, more Shakespearean nature of Thor, but he's still able to give a few quips here and there, and he's still adjusting to Earth life and human life, but he still feels out of place, and I like that element of the character that we've kind of lost as we've gone on with him through Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder. And so I love the early nature of this character. Captain America, of course, he's still that man out of time, dealing with the displacement. He's been frozen in time, awake in a modern setting, and he's adjusting to modern life. That was an interesting aspect to the character. I love that they were able to tackle elements of that with him. Agent Coulson being this huge fanboy of Captain America. Speaking about Agent Coulson, Clark Gregg was great as this character, an original character created for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Agent Coulson did not originate in the comics. He originated in the film Iron Man with Clark Gregg. Now, he has since transferred over to the comics, but he was great. He's always been one of my favorite characters in the MCU, and I have a soft spot for the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I know there's a lot of people that don't like that show, but there's a lot of people that do like that show. There's a lot of fans of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm one of them, and I have truly loved being able to see this character return, be it in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, be it in Captain Marvel, be it in the What If series, and Clark Gregg's always willing to come back as this character. I thought he did an amazing job. He was a standout performer in the Avengers. Mark Ruffalo being newly introduced as Hulk in the MCU. At this point, nobody had reprised their character of the Hulk. Eric Bana only got to play him once. Edward Norton was going to keep playing the character, and the studio figured out he wasn't the easiest person to work with, and so they went with Mark Ruffalo, the original choice for the Hulk from the director Louis Leterrier from the Incredible Hulk film. He originally wanted to go with Mark Ruffalo, so eventually they did get around to using him as Bruce Banner. He brought a great element to the character. Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow was great. We hadn't really seen anything from Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. He had one brief cameo in Thor, but here he really gets to shine. Of course, he's kind of zombified through a lot of this movie, but then at the end of the film, he really gets to shine as the character. And then, of course, Samuel L. Jackson gets to do even more as Nick Fury, kind of been teased and what he can do as the character in all the films in Phase 1, but here he really gets to shine. And Tom Hiddleston, of course, doing even greater stuff as Loki. He was already great as the character in the first Thor film, but I think this is probably one of my favorite performances of his. I think as far as the villainous Loki, this is my favorite performance of his, but Loki overall, my favorite stuff of that character probably comes from the Loki show on Disney+, but I love this version of the character, this villainous take on the character. I thought he did amazing with the role. And then, of course, we get those teases of Thanos and the Infinity Saga at the end of the film. Of course, when that mid-credits scene popped up, I did stick around for that, and I knew that was coming. I didn't know anything about the shawarma scene. I ended up walking out of the theater before I got a chance to watch the shawarma scene, but I did watch the Thanos scene in the mid-credits because I knew that was coming up. Of course, I got up out of my seat and I was like, so Red Skull's coming back? I thought it was a weird version of Red Skull. I didn't know that was Thanos until I read up on some stuff after the film had already come out. And so early stages of the MCU, not really familiar with where the MCU was going. It was before the age of kind of knowing what all these movies were supposed to be, what they were all going to be, all the comic inspiration they were drawing from. I didn't know any of that until now. Like, now I can follow all these movies. I kind of know what we're getting before we even get to the movie, or at least elements of the movies that we're going to be getting. It was a refreshing stage in my life of not really knowing much about these characters, going in blind, and then just having a great experience at the theater. I can go on and on and on about how much I like this movie, all the great scenes, elements, all the great dialogue. There's so much to say about this movie. One thing I do want to talk about is Alan Silvestri's score for the Avengers. It is one of the greatest comic book scores that has been made. It is so memorable, so catchy. And Alan Silvestri, again, he's one of my favorite film composers of all time. Of course, he has composed my favorite film of all time, being Back to the Future, and he got his start in the MCU with Captain America: The First Avenger, and then they carried him over into the Avengers. You can kind of hear some similarities in how he did the Captain America theme and some stuff that he carried over into the Avengers. When you hear an Alan Silvestri theme, you know it's an Alan Silvestri theme, and it was so good, so memorable, so catchy. When you hear that theme, you know it's the theme for the Avengers, you know it's the Avengers theme. I love that they were able to bring him back as composer in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, hoping he comes back in Doomsday and Secret Wars. He didn't come back in Age of Ultron, but they still used elements of his theme throughout that film. So I love that his theme has been able to live on and continue, and he just brought an amazing element to this film. This film really works because of the acting, because of the directing, the storytelling, and the score just brings all of that together and is able to bring up those emotions. Remember that Avengers Assemble circle shot? That is so cool. That music just fills you up and gives you so much joy and excitement, and it was just an amazing time at the theater. So I continue to gush and gush and gush about this movie. Let's just move on to what was mixed about the Avengers. All right, what was mixed about the Avengers? There's a lot of setup that's required to reintroduce you to all of these individual characters. That's where I think the other Avengers films in the series do a better job, is they're able to just jump right into the event, jump right into the lives of these characters. In the case of the Avengers, it's a little more slow going. It's a little bit more of a slow burn, getting you reintroduced to these characters, and of course, introducing you to characters that you didn't either know super well, like Hawkeye, introducing you to a new actor in Mark Ruffalo playing the Hulk. And it takes a little bit for the plot to get going, for the plot to get moving. But that aspect of it doesn't bring the plot down. It just takes a little while to get to the central plot of the film. The build-up does take a little while, but I do appreciate it. For me, it does work, but that still could be mixed for some of you, and it's not necessarily what I think some of the audience is looking for. But like I said, it doesn't bring the plot down. It just takes a little bit of time getting through the main plot and pushing us to the central focus of what the film is about. What was bad about the Avengers? Just one thing, because this movie for me is one of the best films in the MCU. The only thing that didn't really work for me was Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye character being kind of zombified for most of the film. Thankfully, they fixed that and course corrected that with later entries of Hawkeye in Avengers Age of Ultron. They're really hardcore course corrected. But this movie, I think that's where most of the flack came from. Hawkeye just kind of seems like a non-player through most of this movie. He's super zombified through a lot of it. He's controlled by Loki for the majority of the film. It's not until the final act that he becomes his own character again and regains his agency. That's where I think that character didn't work, but everything else about the movie truly, truly did work for me. I love this movie. I can continue to gush about this movie, but this movie is so entertaining, so well done. I truly love this movie, and I always love being able to rewatch this movie. It is truly a wonderful experience. I thoroughly love The Avengers. If you have somehow not seen The Avengers, do yourself a favor and watch it right now. If you haven't seen it in a while, do a rewatch of this movie. It is so good. That smaller scale, the early MCU feel is just so special. Those Phase 1 movies were so special. It doesn't feel like this big corporate conglomerate like some of the MCU can feel as we get further on throughout the series. There was a little bit more individuality to these movies, and they were still trying to figure out what is the structure. The Avengers kind of established what the structure of the MCU was going to be going forward. For better or for worse, it established that structure, but it's a special experience, and I still remember fondly my experience watching the Avengers for the first time. Wonderful. The action was great. The acting was great. It's just so spectacular, and I love this movie. If I'm going to give this movie a rating, it's got to be a 5 out of 5 or an A+ on the letter scale. I'm going to say it right now. This movie, I'm going to rate it as perfect. I know it has a few things that draw it back, but it's so good, so entertaining. I thoroughly love it. Always love getting the chance to rewatch it. I just look on this film so fondly. For me, it is a 5 out of 5. It's an A+. I love The Avengers. It is one of the best movies in the entire run of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If you've seen this film, go down in the comment section and let me know what you thought of this movie. Let me know what some of your favorite moments from The Avengers were. I would love to hear from you. Before you go, remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified when new videos go live on this channel. When you guys do that, it always helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. Hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.